Hi, my name is Brian. I've been a winemaker for over 20 years, and I'm very excited to bring to you Winemaking Bootcamp, a 10 video series that we are putting on through Hometown Wine Company. And I want you to take a walk here to begin with through the vineyard, and I want to talk to you about the vineyard life cycle. So right now the vineyard is in the later part of the season. The grapes are set, the leaves and the shoots are in position, but with grape and the vineyard life cycle, I want to go back to wintertime. So back in usually January, February, the vineyard goes through pruning. So as the life cycle starts, I always think of dormancy, and where we have a bunch of these shoots, no leaves, and we're going through and we are pruning the vineyard back. And when we're pruning the vineyard back, what the couple more important things are is thinking of how we're pruning it, how the shoots are going to come out next year. So with this trellis is what it's called is VSP. And this trellis is throughout the industry, throughout the world. It's very popular. VSP stands for vertical, shoot, and then positioning, which means how the wires are positioning so they can make the shoots go vertical. So as you're going through back to the vineyard life cycle, going through and pruning, you're looking to prune the grapevine to make sure that the shoots are going to come up vertically, so it's really easy to trellis. And you're thinking about this year and next year, because you have to prune back to basically 2 buds at least to be able to have that bud coming out and being able to come up vertically on this one, and then also have the bud for next year. If you're trimmed back to 1 year, to 1 bud, you're gonna miss 1 year. So you wanna make sure that you prune appropriately. So after pruning, what we have is bud break. And with bud break is the buds that are left over, they'll have, of course, being able to start pushing out. And that usually happens in most vineyards sometime in March, maybe in some late vineyards, April. And then going on from there, you have bloom, so you have the flowers blooming. And that's usually done in April, May time, and that is a very important time for the vineyard. And with those set with the flowers is that if you have rain, hail, or some sort of rain event, you can knock those flowers out, basically getting rid of the clusters of grapes. So you want to make sure that hopefully flowering goes really well, you don't have issues at that time. I know that right now in 2022 there's been several weather events going on up in the northern part of the west coast of the United States, as well as some other areas throughout the world where they didn't have such great set and bloom. So when the bloom happened, they had a freeze event, and all of a sudden they lost a lot of grapes. So you're very aware of the weather and everything that's going on with the vineyard, and to make sure that you have the right choices as you go along when you go to plant the vineyard. You don't want to plant the vineyard in some area where the grapes will never come to maturity. So back to the vineyard life cycle, after the bloom period is what we get the set. So within that bloom, the flowers will start turning into the grapes, and the grapes will start forming into clusters. After the set, we have what the French call veraison, which is the turning of colors. So as we're walking through the vineyard, that's happening now. So you have a lot of the grapes have already turned colors, and then as we're going along, all of a sudden you'll see one here that hasn't quite caught up. So it's starting to turn colors, and you can see the light purple, the dark purple, and you can see the green. And over the next couple of weeks, what's happening now is these grapes are moving from set, from green to color, and the sugars are building up and the flavors are starting to build up in the grapes. And that will go on from, we're here in August right now, and that'll go on through October. And then after veraison, what we'll do is we'll get closer to harvest, and that's when the grapes are at the optimum of sugar and intensity of flavors, and tannin and everything that you're looking for. When you go to plant a vineyard or to decide on what rootstock to use. Like this vineyard is Cabernet. The Scion or the clone was originally from Napa, and it's an early ripening clone, but also it's a clone where it has looser clusters. And the advantages of this is that it ripens fairly quickly, but also if you have fog intrusion where you have a lot of moisture, or if you have a rain event, these clusters are loose, so once the moisture gets in there, it's easier to get out. If you have really tight clusters, a lot of times what will happen is the moisture will get down inside, and then you'll start getting mold or rot because that moisture just won't get out, and then you have a lot of issues of trying to get those grapes to maturity to produce some really high quality wine. But besides the clone, you also need to choose a rootstock that is pest resistant. So, phylloxera is a pest that will eat the grapevines from down in the dirt going up, will limit production. That was a lot of problems back in the 70s and 80s, but now there's a lot of phylloxera resistant rootstock. This one is 1103 Paulson, which has a lot of advantages of how it's able to collect moisture. It's very dry here in this vineyard. It has drought tolerance, it has pest tolerance, and you have to make sure that you have a lot of pest impact in the vineyard too, and that can be from various bugs to other wildlife like coyotes, especially in California, they get in, and not only would they like the grapes, but more importantly they want water, so they can come in and they can chew on your drip lines and get a drink of water, and then next thing you know, you have no water going to your grapes. So you have to really pay attention to what kind of wildlife and pests that you have in the area to keep out. I know that in other areas of the world like South Africa, they even have baboon problems that come in the vineyard and they'll tear it apart, or sometimes in Northern California, in those areas, they have bear problems and the bear gets into your vineyard and starts tearing into your grapes. You'll lose trellis, everything. So you have to be aware of what the area is, not only for wildlife pests, but also for the grape. So the Cabernet likes a hot area. So here in California, it's very warm. Cool areas, you might choose more like a Riesling or something like a Gewürztraminer that will ripen a little bit easier. Look at the vineyard here. You can notice that we do have the sun, comes up and it comes over the vineyard this way. So as it's coming up and over, basically from east to west, we have the vertical shoot positioning coming up and coming up here. So on this side especially, you can see is that all the leaves are up and they're facing into the sun, so you have maximum exposure to the sun and for photosynthesis for the grapes to get those to maturity. So as your vertical shoot positioning and the shoots are up, it forms a wall of leaves to catch not only photosynthesis, but also just as important is to protect the grapes from down below. So if you see the grapes below, they're in the shade and they're protected against the sun as well, so you don't get that sunburn, you don't get the raisening and other effects that the sun can have, and that will let the grapes ripen evenly to maturity and slowly build the flavors in the grapes of what you want. As you're walking through the vineyard too, also is that you want to look at the vine and how many clusters are the vine. So what we say in winemaking is the vine balanced, and what that means is this vine going to be able to produce the grapes to maturity of what it has on the vine. If you have way too many clusters, there's no way that that's going to produce. You'll end up with grapes that will never get the flavor profile, the sugars to be able to make that high quality wine, and what you'll end up with is a bunch of green grapes and a bunch of green flavors in your wine. You don't want that. So you want to make sure that they're balanced. And kind of during this time, during veraison, you can come through and you can see of how well the balance is, and you can see also what we call second crop. So you'll have the main grape clusters here is what you want, but you'll have what we call second crop, and you'll see these little clusters coming off. These usually never ripen, and what they'll do is they'll take a lot of the nutrients and a lot of the balance away from the vine. So what you want to do is you want to remove these to be able to have the grapes be able to produce the maturity levels of what you want. And as you're walking through this, you're walking through the vineyard, you can see how many clusters per vine, and you can kind of get the idea of how the balance the vineyard is. And I know this vineyard's like 6 or 7 years old, so it's kind of that young teenage years where it's got a lot of vitality and it's able to produce lots of grapes. If this was an older vine, there'd be less clusters. They'd be probably more intense, but you just wouldn't get this amount of grapes off of that. And a young vine, you would get less clusters, and it would have more of a difficult time because of less leaf, less shoots to be able to get to maturity. So it's very important to have a balanced vine to make a high quality wine. And as you go through the life cycle, you're able to watch of how the vineyard matures and how it goes through its life cycle to be able to produce a high quality grape. So it's very exciting out here. We're really excited to bring this series to you, and really excited to see the life cycle of the vineyard and the steps of winemaking from now through fermentation, through stabilization, blending, bottling, and enjoyment. So we're very excited that you're here today, and we hope you follow us along.